Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bill Reid Gallery's presentation of Yahguudangang, to pay respect, looking at and hearing from our guest speakers, Lucy Bell and Nika Collison, about the repatriation journey of the Haida people. And it's really a great pleasure for us to be here today. We have this wonderful exhibition on at the Bill Reid Gallery right now, the Yahguudangang show, which is on loan to us, or it's a smaller version of a bigger exhibition that's on loan to us from the Haida Ḳ'awaas Museum. And so we were really excited to have Lucy and Nika join us to speak more about the repatriation journey, all of the information that's behind the exhibition, and also about the repatriation committee of the Haida people. I did want to acknowledge that the Bill Reid Gallery is situated in Vancouver, so we are currently on the unceded ancestral territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh people, and we're very honored to live and work here on a regular basis. The gallery does represent the contemporary art of Bill Reid and all of the Northwest Coast nations. So we are also happy to be working up and down the coast with people from up and down the coast. I would also like to acknowledge that this speaker series that this webinar is part of the To Speak with the Golden Voice exhibition speaker series, which is co-presented by the Bill Reid Gallery and the Bill Reid, the Indigenous Studies Department at SFU. So thank you so much to them for their help. So with that, I would really like to turn it over to our guest speakers, Lucy and Nika, and allow them to introduce themselves. And then I know they've got some wonderful slides and all sorts of amazing things to share with us. And I will turn off my video and then pop back in at the end. I was going to mention that we are going to have a Q&A session. So please put your questions into the Q&A box, and we will be speaking. Lucy and Nika will speak for about 40 minutes, and then we'll have the last part of our hour to answer questions. So thanks so much, and see you. There we go.
Singay last ditolang, Sdaahl Ḳ'awaas Henodikiang, Chichgittens, Stu Diasgagang, Ilkunisi, Hadas, Iskan, Ginge Koyas, Di Koya Uslang. Haida Repatriation Committee, the Lung Di Koyadam. My name is Lucy Bell, Sdaahl Ḳ'awaas, and I come from the Chichgitne clan on Haida Ḳ'awaas. I feel very blessed to be home on Haida Ḳ'awaas, to be giving this talk. I'm a little bit sad I'm not sitting beside Nika today, but that will happen, and I'm feel very honored to have been invited by the Bill Reid Gallery, by Beth, to speak about our repatriation journey with my good friend Nika. Nika, introduce yourself.
Hawa di takwi Haida Gatlas is the lang wad luhan gathul kilt la di Haida Wagin di Kayatlanes / Haida Haida Ḳ'awaas Museum, South Linden di Skangul Chaga. Wagin Itkunisi to Yahguudangang way. Hawa. So we're here today. Sorry, I forgot I was continuing on from there. In English too, I suppose I should say. My name is Nika, and I work at the Haida Ḳ'awaas Museum. And, you know, Lucy sent her love, and I sent my love to our people and our ancestors. So we thought in going through some of the Haida repatriation journey, we have a flow of setting context. How did we wind up here today? And then Lou will talk about our ancestors and her journey there, and her personal journey, because she is the leader of our repatriation movement. We'll move then into the living connections between ourselves and our ancestral treasures and belongings. We'll move from that into some of our personal museum or experiences with Western museums. And then we'd like to speak briefly as well about the Indigenous Repatriation Handbook that Lou and Lou-ann Neel and myself wrote. And we'll follow it up with a brief overview of the exhibition that Beth spoke to in the beginning of the talk, where we first created it and hosted it at our Haida Museum. And then we'll go into questions and answers from as far as I can tell. So I'm going to try and share my screen. Lou and I have put together some images for as we go along. Can everyone see okay, Beth? Are we on the screen, Lou, the image?
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. So in understanding how we are here today sharing with our friends and allies online, it actually starts from before human occupation on Earth, but to fast forward ourselves over millennia in the sake of time, first accepted Western documentation of contact between our people and Europeans or foreigners of that sort was in 1774. And shortly after, a huge fur trade, a maritime fur trade occurred, and we participated in that. When the sea otter were hunted to near extinction due to the demand and how capitalism can hit all our minds, capitalism became stronger in the visitors' minds, the Europeans and British. And as their economy started to wane, they began to look towards land occupation, which they'd been doing for a few hundred years earlier, moving from the west or the east coast of Turtle Island towards the west. By 1862, they had stopped making treaties across Canada, partly as their colonial regimes grew, and partly because as the word on treaties grew, our people on the coast were not interested in entering into them because of the problems that occurred. So I guess the best way to put it is that the colonizers introduced smallpox to the coast, and this was a known form of cultural genocide that had been, through colonial eyes, very successful in the South, in what we now know as the United States. And they withheld vaccinations from specific nations like the Haida, and through that, the smallpox spread. There was also purposeful dumping, I suppose, of people infected with smallpox onto our islands. So before this, there were a couple of less impact on our people, and my understanding is unintentionally placed waves of smallpox that traveled, faster than the colonizers in some ways, and in others slowed down. So when you go from over 10,000 people upwards of 30,000 people in about 100-year time, and by 1915 you have less than 600 on Haida Gwaii and about 400 in Alaska of Haida people, that's an incredible trauma and great loss that we still feel today through intergenerational passing down. Despite this colonial genocide and followed by, a biological genocide followed by a cultural genocide, these moments in between 1862 High Tide and 1915, we still actively thrive. The survivors actively thrived, and evidence of that is this archival photo here of Chief Ňkaytslugás, who is standing in front of his house, where people always want to go, in the village of Haina, one of my clan's ancestral villages. And this is in 1888. That doesn't mean that pillaging and the force of handing over our treasures had not begun. By 1897, there was really active taking of our ancestral remains that had begun before this letter that you can see in the lower left corner, written by George Dorsey, a collector of the day, and Charles Newcomb, a collector of the day, which reads, "Will you kindly send me more information about the totem pole you wish to dispose of, also about any duplicate specimens you may be willing to sell. Have you any skulls or skeletons that you will sell or exchange? The wild thing about this letter, before I hand it over to Lou to talk more about how this movement began, is that in 2003, we planned and worked a long time to go to the Chicago Field Museum to bring home the ancestral remains of 168 of our ancestors. And we'd set our reburial dates, long before we went as well. Just before we went, I was going through Newcomb's fawns, like records of his writings, and found this letter. And that was a very hard letter to find. But the beauty in it is that Ty, can you turn my phone off, please? Sorry, we're doing this from home. The beautiful full circle thing that happened within it is that this letter was written on October 26, 1897. And we'd already set the date for October 26, 2003 to rebury the ancestors we brought home from the Chicago Field Museum. And how they got there was from collectors George Dorsey and Charles Newcomb. So that full circle of trauma and psychological and physical violence, that instant within our greater history came full circle. But there are many circles surrounding that one example that have not connected in its entirety, and that's the work we continue to do.
Okay, my turn to talk. I'm going to touch base on how we got to be repatriating our ancestors and our belongings. So I think the creation of the Haida Repatriation Committee began when I was an intern at the RBCM Museum, and it's interesting that you speak about the signs, Nika, and that's totally what I experienced myself was at the museum, hearing the ancestors, hearing the spirit of children in the museum, and taking that message home to the Haida, and expecting my relatives and friends back home on Haida Nation, everybody older than me and wiser than me, to do something about it, but to be told that this was my journey and my calling, and being told to just get on with it, get to work. And that led to the creation of the Haida Repatriation Committee. And it really was a beautiful bringing together of our nations, of our communities, and bringing together of our families, of our friends, connecting us to our ancestors, to our language, to some of these belongings in museums all over the world. And I don't think I knew it at the time. Probably, I don't know, did you know, Nika, that this would be a lifelong journey for us? I think it really has been a calling for many of us. And I'm just so proud to be a part of that, and proud to have passed that learning on. In the slides before, you see young people making bentwood boxes. You see my daughter Amelia carrying a bentwood box of an ancestor to be reburied. This really has been intergenerational healing for us. Oh, look at you trying so hard to get our pictures back up. Here we go. While you're doing that, I'll just mention that we've been repatriating, the committee has been repatriating since, 1996? Does that sound right? Up until today. And to date, we've brought home over 500 of our ancestors. And this slide here, you'll see Andy Wilson and some of the kids making these beautiful bentwood boxes. And you'll see, I don't have my glasses on. I think that's Jenny at the bottom, preparing food offerings for our ancestors. Okay, we're back up. So you can keep moving onto your slide next, I think, Nika.
Hi, Lou. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So there's the honoring and respecting of our ancestors, and Lou, again, Ḥ'awaas so much for taking on the responsibility and leading the way, and making room for everyone as we started to understand, bringing us all in, bringing the entire intergenerational community all in, and extending it to our friends and allies, the work. So when we visit our collections in museums around the world, we often bring huge delegations, and again, intergenerational, spanning all ages, and we go to establish relationships with museums. We're mandated by our Haida Nation to approach repatriation with the goal of mutual respect, cooperation, and trust. So when we go there, we're building relationships where we know, like Lou said, this is lifetime, this is real life. And in that we have to, that means we're not in a silo. It involves the other side, for lack of a better word. And that's a really transformative and important part of repatriation, is we all need to learn about and accept the real past and existing history of Indigenous and Canadian governments and peoples. Then you need to find your grief, and then you need to make things right, and then you can move forward. So part of that when we visit is visiting our belongings and our ancestral treasures. And the connections are not only that we know these are our ancestors, that we're connected to them between that, but there's familial connections that are directly known. A quick example here is at the American Museum of Natural History. The drawing on the bottom is done by my great-great-grandfather, John Cross, a grandfather to many, that depicts the first tree to grow on Haida Gwaii after the last ice age, which is the Ch'ath or pine tree. And science has recently discovered, using our knowledge of oral histories, that indeed the first tree to grow on Haida Gwaii was the Ch'ath, the pine tree. On the top, while this incredible bentwood dish, we do not know the Haida artist who created it, but this was one of Bill's most favorite and held up pieces, and he dubbed it, Bill Reed's most favorite pieces, and he dubbed it the final exam, meaning if you can reach this level of design and understanding, it is an exam that you can pass. I've known about it always, but to be able to go to the museum, I didn't even know it was there, and to see it and immediately go, oh my God, and start crying, because this is part of my grandfather's love. So there's personal connections like that. Oh, am I on? If you wouldn't mind, I will talk about the mountain goat chest later when I can get the screen up. So do you want to talk about your experiences with museums, with Western museums, while I figure this out?
Oh, that's a big topic, Nika. The Haida Repatriation Committee has visited museums all over the globe, and we really made it a priority to bring delegations. It wasn't just a couple of people going. We couldn't. I think I got used to traveling only with a big delegation. It felt very strange to travel just by myself. But how how beautiful it was for us to go to museums as a whole group and be learning and seeing our ancestors' treasures, their creations, and to be holding them and loving them together. And I just loved learning together with everybody. I can say that it wasn't an easy journey. I do have hope that museums are growing and coming along and changing. I think in my experience, the further away we got from Haida Gwaii, the more difficult it was to have real relationships with museums and the people that work there, and to even have access to our belongings and our ancestors, to be invited. You know, I remember writing letters. There was no internet back then. Writing to get into museums in Europe and saying, "Hey, we're coming to Europe. We'll be there in 6 months. We want to come and see our treasures." And then to be receiving letters back saying, "Sorry, we're busy." That was a shock. You know, we're that's not the kind of host that we've grown up to be. So to receive such disrespect was very difficult, and it does. I think we experience it every time we've gone on a repatriation trip, saying they're too busy, saying that you know, trying to get us to squabble over our ancestors, you know, being told that, oh, those Haida ancestors don't come from Haida Gwaii, being told that the Haida don't have a right to pick and choose what items to repatriate, being told that we can't treat the museum like a grocery store. You know, we're still hearing these things today. It's ridiculous. And I think if museums want to fight with us, keep saying those things. All it's going to do is piss us off and make us dig our heels in more. But we've always approached it with respect and trying to find ways of working in friendship and collaboration. And just once in a while, there's some shitty things that happen, but overall, I think we have done a really good job, I think, of instigating reconciliation before reconciliation was such a big word thrown around. We got pretty good at it, I think, Nika. Okay, you got your slides back up? Okay, you're up. Unmute.
Okay, hawaloo. And it's not, I think too, I love hearing what Lou just said, because we have always been incredibly diplomatic, and what we celebrate to the world is what is possible and the good motions that we make forward. But it doesn't mean there's not stories behind. And with all of this, it's all of these movements and revealings and getting tired, you know, that's where we are. We've made progress with allies, but we're tired. You know, this is 25 years plus. We should be farther ahead. And so I want to show an example that is both incredible and beautiful, but also reflects the responsibility that society has to make change. When we went to, and the American Museum of Natural History is who I'm speaking of, and they are our friends. We first went there in 2002 to bring home the remains of 48 of our relatives. And even getting through there, it took a while. I actually wasn't part of the initiating the relationship. By the time I got in, they'd agreed to do it, and then changed their mind. And what was really nice is the new curator did a coastal, you know, like a visit along the coast to get to know people. So when he came to Haida Gwaii, we more or less kidnapped him, and 2 of his 3 days were actually spent going to Skidegate and Old Masset to see the work we do, to see the children involved, to see where we rebury our ancestors. And within 3 weeks of him getting back to the museum, they said yes. So you can see there's relationships that do need to happen, even if we have to trick, you know, once in a while people into them. We went, and of course we visited our collections, and this chest was in the storage room of the New York Museum. As soon as we saw it, we knew it was of the Gáag'áils Ţíogháis, or Skidan's clan. And this was in 2002, and we've maintained relationships with the museum, went back and got another 12 ancestors in 2014. Come 2017, we'd negotiated, and with enthusiasm of the New York Museum, this ancient chest to come home to participate in a very important potlatch in Haida history, which was the potlatch of inaugurating Gdansta. Gujau took on the responsibility in the name of Gdansta, and it was integral, it was critical that this chest come home and participate in that potlatch. The chest left Haida Gwaii in 1901, so 116 years later, it came back to Haida Gwaii, and it's the one on the right now. You're seeing the moon side of it. The moon is the highest crest of the chief of the Gáag'áils Ţíogháis. From it, 25 coppers, ceremonial coppers, were given out. It was an historic, in a historic moment, and I'll take a moment to say this chest on the right or left is a recreation of a masterful chest held at the Pitt Rivers Museum that Gdansta's two sons made. So these are both actually the first time, or you know, these pieces came home in their different iterations to participate in life again, to participate in what they were made for. After that, we put our ancestral treasure into our museum, where it was actually shared with everyone, and lived in our museum for 2.5 years. During that time, we made a plan, and we had the chest recreated by Gujau's, Gdansta's sons, Jalin and Gwaii, and their nephew, Tyler. That participated in an exhibition we'll talk to a little closer to the end. But what I want to say is, after just before the exhibition ended, this beautiful chest went back to New York. The loan was over, and you know, so then this is what is left 2.5 years later, and sure, we have this one, but and this is a very important one. But to bring this chest home cost over $200,000, and a heck of a lot more of our time, as Lou has pointed out. So I think I'm not taking down the American Museum of Natural History when I say this. This isn't limited to an institution. This is everyone's responsibility to not put onus of hours, and like thousands of hours of our own time, unpaid time, and then over $200,000 just so we could get this ancestral chest home, so we could honor and respect it and let it live. And then it goes away again. So there's beauty in the story, but there's a lot more work to do.
Oh. Okay, I'll take a moment to talk about the Indigenous Repatriation Handbook. This was created at the Royal BC Museum. Nika and Lou-ann Neel and I created this handbook to help Indigenous people involved in repatriation, and to give some practical tips, and give some case study, and it's been quite well received, and it's surprisingly a handbook that is really used in international museums as well, which is it's a really nice surprise. And I hope that we can continue to be telling our stories, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, and to keep sharing strategies for moving repatriation forward. And this is available online at the Royal BC Museum website if you'd like to download it, or you can buy it. And okay, that's all I'm going to say about that.
There was like you organized a conference that you felt was very necessary, and it was an Indigenous Repatriation Conference. And this was what you determined was the most important, or the first thing that needed to come out, right?
Yeah, that was when the provincial government gave money to the Royal BC Museum to do something about repatriation. The first thing that we did was host a repatriation conference and ask Indigenous people and museums what would be most helpful. What can we do to keep moving repatriation along in a positive way? And so many of the participants at the conference were just starting their repatriation journey and looking to us for advice on how to even get started. So this was our response, one of the responses to their requests.
And I have to say how fun, like it was very emotional. It was so like you feel stressed because you really want to make sure that the context is provided, that there's beautiful things that can come out of it. It's coming from an Indigenous worldview, and it felt pretty fun. And I don't say this disrespectfully. It felt fun to write about museum people, Western museum people, in the sense of we're saying, you know, our, you know, museum workers, and to be able to look at their social side of things and see how we can make space for ourselves within that world, or how they can make space for us in that world. So it was just kind of fun too. That was published in spring 2019, and then we opened an exhibition at the Haida Museum in June 2019 that we'd been working on, Lou and I and the greater museum staff at the Haida Museum and the greater Haida Repatriation Committee. This image was actually, I'm not a photographer, my photos look horrible, but this image I actually snapshotted at the Royal BC Museum when I was visiting there. And when we were looking for an image to let everyone know about this exhibition, it became the right one. You see, like first of all, just there'd be so many people related to the artist. Lou and myself are related to the artist, our cousin Vince, who's also part of repatriation in a big way. I kind of think they give a look about how they feel being on the wall, you know, behind glass, and we are working to bring those representation of our people home. The exhibition was to communicate the repatriation journey of the Haida Nation, and the name of the show and the name of our work actually is Yahguudangang, to pay respect. We have been working as a Haida Repatriation Committee, through our museum, through the Haida Heritage and Repatriation Society, and with independent scholars in our community since about 2005 or more, to research, to connect and research with museums around the world. And to date, I believe over 200 museums have been contacted, and we're aware right now of well over 12,000 physical cultural belongings that are spread amongst global museums. So what we did was we hired a Haida scholar to collate and collect, and he'd done a ton of research himself. He presented us with 3,000 images of our ancestral treasures, which we had to then render down to 1,500 because we didn't have enough money to do more. Can you imagine if these walls were covered from ceiling to floor, every single wall? It still wouldn't represent what's out there in the world. We also have images, but I don't have them here. We had a section to honor our ancestors. They're the reason that we're here today. They didn't just survive, they survived Haida identity, and they created in the hardest of times an open door that we could walk through when we were ready. So then we also had a section of visiting museums and our relationships with our museum friends, and also just the act of being there. So another part of the exhibit was to put out, even though our museum, you know, has pieces all over the place, was to put out examples of how our treasures have come home. So over here, you can't really see it, but there's an argillite pole, and that was brought home through the Canada's Cultural Properties program. We had to buy it, and they were able to help us with money. This basket here is actually Lucy's old nunai. It was woven by Lucy Frank. And that one came to our museum through, I believe it was purchased back in the days when there were 2 Canadian people running the museum. This stone bowl is a very generous and beautiful donation from Donald Ellis. It's an incredible bowl. There's spoons, horn spoons behind it that came from a lovely lady named Nancy Masterman. And there's a mall, a beautiful mall here that you can't see again, that came from an excavation on Haida Gwaii. This is a bentwood dish that comes through a long-term loan with Parks Canada. And this halibut hook here is actually a new piece carved by Christian White from Old Masset. So there's different ways that we bring ourselves back, because this is a traditional hook. I would like to say most of our collection is built on what I outlined here. Perhaps the earliest repatriation in Canada was the return of some poles from the Royal BC Museum, but then you skip forward to pretty much 2019, and that's pretty much when we got our next repatriation of belongings from Western museums, the UBC Museum of Anthropology and the Museum of Vancouver, who were working on an additional repatriation with. So it was quite a comprehensive exhibition, and as Beth said, there's a smaller version of it at the Bill Reid Gallery right now, and we're really happy that the Bill Reid Gallery would want to take on this hard subject. I think this is the only what you'd call major exhibition on repatriation in Canada, possibly. You must want to speak about that, Lou, the exhibition, or
I will say I worked so hard on my holiday. When I went home, I thought I was going home for the opening of the lovely exhibition, and Nika put me right to work. I got off the plane and she put me right to work, helping with the text and helping, you know, with what the leftovers, because it was opening that day. And I thought I was just gonna show up and put my lipstick on and go parade around, but no, I had to help out. But that was exactly what I needed to do, and that I'm so glad I had the opportunity to help you with it, Nika. So how about for putting me to work? But how incredible that there are just, it just always just hurts my heart too, that there's that many of our belongings out in the world. And you know, we grew up in the era where there was barely anything here on Haida Gwaii, you know, hearing the stories of our relatives, you know, using paper masks, paper bags as masks, and, you know, my Nanny Grace using a ice cream bucket and a wooden spoon to teach us songs, and, you know, putting crochet blankets on us for regalia as we danced in her living room. It's just not right, and it just, you know, it hurts my heart to know that all of these belongings are out there. And I think our belongings, as much as we are longing for them, I think our belongings are longing for us as well. And you can totally feel that excitement when we're in museums and we're taking out our our treasures, that spiritual connection and that joy, of reuniting. That's real, and I think it resonates with each of us. And like I was saying earlier about bringing so many different people to museums, to be a part of helping other Haidas have that connection too. That's been a really meaningful piece of the journey for me. I'll take I think you were asking me about, thank you, Nika. She's been helping me with, now that I'm on my PhD journey, I'm going to focus my PhD research on the belongings of our ancestors. And so often other people are writing about our story, or telling our story. And I feel like it's time for me to tell my story and write my story, and to be a part of helping us bring home more of our belongings. So that, I think that is my next calling in life. I think I'm just really glad to be home and to be healing from my previous experience, and to be rethinking what the Creator has in store for me. And I can't wait to see you later tonight to be talking about this, Nika. Yeah, I'll leave it there, Nika. What else can we? How are we doing for time? Ooh.
Hi, it's Beth. I'm going to join back in and maybe facilitate some of the questions. We have a couple of questions, and yes, can you see me?
Yeah, I just want to maybe just give a quick wrap up real quick.
Yes, that would be great.
I was just trying to get unmuted when Lou passed it over to me. So, one thing is, in Hideaway, there is a way back in the day where you call put a string on it. And I think as our ancestors were experiencing what they experienced, and the ones that didn't make it and the ones that did, and we talk about this, they put a string on themselves and to the future generations, so that we would be pulled back to them and to our identity. And you just see it. You can just see it even within these small little pieces. Like this piece here is Raven revealing their female self. To find a physical evidence of oral histories we have of Raven's gender fluidity. Or this piece you can't see well, which is of Ḳ'aghwa, which is my clan's principal crest. You see, like, here's a frog, so we know that hat belonged to an Eagle clan. At least we can see that. You can see the documentation. It tells stories not only of pre-contact, but of contact too. So you see a drawing like this. This is a drawing made for an anthropologist. This is I lost it. This is a bracelet that was made during contact times. These are models of our people, so documenting transition in times. And so it's not, some people might think it's limited, to, oh, this is archaic and this is old, but they want it back. No, this is history. This is everyone's history, and it's a storybook, an important storybook, and we need chapters. We need most of the chapters back, because we're putting ourselves back together through that. So, how about Beth?
Thank you to you both. I think it's you shared so much and really helped make it so clear how emotional and how much emotion and energy goes into all of these steps. So I really, really appreciate your sharing all of this with us. And I know that there's many questions starting to come up here. Maybe one of the first questions that came up was, what countries and museums have been helpful to you You know, I know that there's a list of almost 200 museums and locations that you've visited. Are there some that stick out that you've really been able to build great relationships with?
I would say that it's the closer we were to Haida Gwaii, the stronger the relationship was. Easier to be friends when you can go and visit them easily, right? And to start out our journey without much internet connection, we weren't able to do this. We didn't have Zoom, I think, back in the day, or we weren't using it back in the day. Nika, do you want to speak to any of our good buddies in the museum world?
Yeah, I would say that the strong and long-standing connections we have with museums were initially formed by us bringing home our relatives. That, you know, our cousin Vince, he says reconciliation begins at home. And we need to, so that is the foundation. You know, our museum started in 76 and that's built on repatriation, but you know, it got so far and it took Lou to have the reminders, let the ancestors let her know that that's where we have to start, is with our relatives and taking care of them. So those are some pretty strong relationships, but you can lose them through non-passing down of genealogy within Western museums. So we've had some great relationships, and then out of left field, you're like, oh my God, we're starting again. But currently, I want to say that through the Haida Gwaii Museum, we do have global relationships as Lucy maintains them too. So currently, we're working with a museum in Switzerland, the National Museum in Canada, a Berlin Museum, a small museum in England, and the American Museum of Natural History, and the UBC Museum of Anthropology, and the Museum of Vancouver. So we have 4 staff, and we're working with all of these people on projects actively, because we care about our future, and we do understand and care about coexistence. But none of those places, except maybe one, have even discussed something coming home. So it's a complicated relationship. It's someone said once, and I'm going to sound mean, but you know, we got to start telling more of the backstory, that sometimes it feels like museums keep a carrot just enough in front of us that we all move forward, but just enough that we can't complain about not being more forward. And, you know, that's a reality.
There's a question here about how does NAGPRA, the US law about Indigenous religious and funerary objects, affect the work you do? Does it help or harm your objectives? That's kind of a natural follow-up to what you were just talking about, I think.
In my experience, and it's you know, it's an experience that it's all of our experiences, that there's Western laws that can support repatriation, but more so Western laws or policies often complicate or prohibit repatriations because they're so siloed and formulaic. Our laws are values that we strive for. We're not perfect, but we also have to honor our laws. And so when we go into a Western museum, Western law doesn't dominate, right? So we've been really successful in doing that with a couple of museums in the United States, saying that might be your law, but here's our law. And certainly anything is possible. And we've brought home ancestors across the border that I don't know if that's a problem other people are having anymore.
Oh, there you are. We lost you for a bit.
Sorry, guys. I need to hold down the fort. I don't know. Bad internet, of course.
Did you want to add anything to that answer, Lucy? Or it was just about NAGPRA and cross-border laws and Western laws helping or hindering.
Oh, what did you say, Nika?
What we always talk about, there's Western laws, but then we have ours, and Western laws, when we're dealing with us, you know, ourselves, we have to honor and push our hideaways. And that's way better than Western law.
And the way that we totally grounded ourselves in that, once we knew how we wanted our ancestors to be treated and not treated, you know, that just made us stronger and more put on more armor to protect our ancestors and ourselves. And you know, sometimes we'd kind of joke about being the cute little Canadians with our little task force instead of NAGPRA, right? And acting out of friendship and instead. But that worked for us. I'm still kind of trying to figure it out too, about whether do we need legislation in repatriation legislation in Canada.
You're freezing a little bit, I think.
Canada.
Yeah.
I kind of go back and forth up to if it came with some money to. Okay, moving on.
Great. There's another question about Nika's point about shifting responsibility from Indigenous people to settler institutions in relation to repatriation is really an important one. Given the experiences each of you have had, what can be done next to contribute to that critical change, that shifting of responsibility?
Well, I'd say, I'm just going to jump in because I'd say the first thing is accepting that our Canadian friends have a privilege of responsibility, right? And to accept they have that responsibility and to not always look to us to provide the answers. Although I'm really glad this question is asked, that's how we can respond. There's a responsibility to learn. You know, don't listen to the rhetoric. Don't listen to the presence of absence in our schools and universities. Don't listen to that. Listen to us and find that guidance and then go do your work and tell others to do that work. Educate them. We love making friendships. We love sharing our knowledge and learning, but we really need people to pick up their socks and find pathways.
I'm going to ask, we did have a question about the idea of the life cycle of the piece, from the creation to the stolen life and the repatriation, if it has been repatriated. And is that ever presented in museums? Is that something, it seems like it's an important part of the narrative, and do we need to do better explaining that?
I think it would be great if everyone could, you know, read that Indigenous Repatriation Handbook. You know, a few of us have published academically or elsewhere. You know, Google us and there'll be more stories in there. But wouldn't it be amazing if every institution in Canada, every museum, dedicated a gallery or a permanent exhibit to being able to reveal the history of Indigenous peoples in the Canadian government, to be able to tell the story factually. We don't have to get ugly, you know, like if you look at our contact and conflict gallery or our repatriation, we don't talk ugly, we give facts. We don't have to make excuses either. So wouldn't that be amazing? Because then the museums would really have to learn. Like when I was saying, you know, don't put all the onus on us. If museums want to contract us to do the work, we will help you that way, but we can't always just take phone calls and emails. Imagine if every museum acknowledged it was on Indigenous territory, told a brief history or a long history, recognized where we are in society and where we want to go.
So I will say that having the Yahguudangang exhibition at the Bill Reid Gallery has been a great eye-opener for many people coming through the show in Vancouver. So unfortunate that during COVID times our visitor numbers are quite down, but I think it really does open people's eyes to the idea of the sheer volume of cultural treasures that are around the world, and that this is you're sharing the Haida story, but that it's also a story that relates just equally to every other single Indigenous nation in North America, and which is a very sad thing to start to understand, but also so meaningful. I don't know if I've lost Nika as well.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you. And I really am sad that Lou's connection has not been able to join us again. But I will just take this opportunity to thank you so much for sharing and being so willing to talk personally and meaningfully, and it means a huge amount, and I think we've all learned so much. The recording of the video will be available through the Bill Reid Gallery website, and also I expect it will be able to have it live in a day or two, and I invite people to come back and listen again. There was one additional question that related to a totem pole in Scotland, and how people almost see them as decoration. And I feel that you answered that in your final statement about how the museums where these items are being displayed need to work a bit harder to make sure that the stories behind the pieces are being shared. So thank you so much, Nika, and thank you so much, Lucy, and thank you to everybody for attending and for putting up with our small glitches as we learn how to run these webinars. Our next
I'm so sorry. I'm going to jump in.
Yes, please do.
I see, there's a couple questions here relating to how can institutions change, right?
Okay, that's great.
I just want to say, first, there's a lot of people on the ground that in these institutions that want change. So it's also the institution itself, the system that is the core of the challenge we need to overcome. And then also in the Indigenous Repatriation Handbook, there is information there for Western museums wishing to repatriate to Indigenous peoples as well. So however, those questions, I just wanted to try and provide an answer.
Right. And we did in the chat put the link to the handbook, which is available online. But as Lucy said, purchasing a copy for your museum if you're or organization is a great idea, because all of those funds help support repatriation efforts. So thank you again, everybody, and we will look forward to seeing you again at our next event. We will be hosting a live talk on October 17th at the Bill Reid Gallery, which will also be filmed for future reference. And then we have a couple more events coming up this fall. So please check our website or Facebook page, or sign up for our e-newsletter. Take care. Have a great day. Hawa.